Hey guys, this is Joshua Seth, voice of Ty on Digimon, and you're listening to Anime Secrets.
Jedi Squadron is a podcast run by the Anime Secrets website. Check us out at animesecrets.org for more anime, video game, tokusatsu, and now Star Wars content. Remember to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts today.
Hello, new Padawans, and welcome to the Jedi Squadron podcast. Here, you will be taking lessons in the many pieces of the Star Wars universe, whether it be the movies, animated series, video games, comics, and etc. This is your training into becoming a Star Wars fan as part of the Jedi Squadron. May your training go well, and may the Force be with you, young Padawans.
What is going on, Star Wars Nation? This is the Jedi Squadron podcast presented by animesecrets.org. I'm your host, Nathan Desa, and today we are going to be doing another novel review. We are taking a cruise through canon as we take a look at the very first book of the Aftermath trilogy, which is simply entitled Aftermath. It is the very first book in the new canon to take place in the post-Battle of Endor / Return of the Jedi era of the Star Wars universe, at least in the new canon. It was written by Chuck Wendig and first published in September of 2015. It was actually one of several pieces of Star Wars content called Journey to the Force Awakens, which was a series of, loosely tied together related Star Wars content to bridge the gap between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. And like I said, it does have two sequels making up the Aftermath trilogy. I will take a look at each of the other two books by themselves after I do this podcast. But today we are only focusing on the first book. So how well does this book do at setting up the new canon's version of the post-Battle of Endor era? Well, let's take a look. As per usual with my new canon reviews, I'm going to try to keep the spoilers to a minimum unless I talk about some connections that it has with other Star Wars content, because I do want to encourage people to read the new canon. So without further ado, let us begin. Aftermath kicks off not too long after the Battle of Endor. At this point, the Rebel Alliance is calling itself the New Republic, and it's more or less established control over the galaxy. But unfortunately, there are a couple of Imperial leaders who are commanding large sections of the remains of the Imperial fleet, as well as several former advisors to Emperor Palpatine, who gather on the outer rim world of Akiva, where they have a secret meeting to plan the course of action to strike back against the New Republic. While Captain Wedge Antilles is out on a scouting mission for the New Republic, he is discovered and taken captive. At the same time, a former Rebel pilot, Nora Wexley, arrives on Akiva to reunite with her estranged son, Temin. In the midst of all this chaos, the two encountered a disgruntled and unhappy former Imperial officer, Sinjir Rathvelis, and a Zabrak bounty hunter attempting to collect a bounty for one of the Imperial leaders, her name is Joss Emery, and the four, along with Temin's battle droid companion, Mr. Bones, have to come together to crash the secret meeting and rescue Wedge before it's too late. So, like I said, this is the first book in the new canon to kind of kick off the new post-Battle of Endor era of the Star Wars universe from the new canon's perspective. Now, that was always one of my favorite eras to explore in Legends. I've read so many books from that era in the Legends continuity. Unfortunately, though, I cannot say that this book does a fantastic job at, establishing this new era. This is going to be the very first new canon novel review, and the only one so far, based on the ones that I've read so far, that is going to be an outwardly just a complete negative review. I really did not like this book. It's like at all. I'm sorry, I hate to sound negative, but and I think one of the big reasons why I have an issue with this book, so there's a lot of things, but I remember when this book was about to hit shelves, like it got released alongside another book, Lost Stars, which is another book I'm going to be covering on the podcast. Although I do want to wait until Riz has read that book, since that is actually a very amazing Star Wars book that I think Riz should be on with me to discuss. But the funny thing is that Lost Stars kind of went under the radar when it hit shelves. Aftermath was the one that was getting all the attention. And I remember, I saw that book, and, I remember how much I loved reading The True Sepulchre, which is a Legends novel that takes place immediately after Return of a Jedi. And I thought, wow, I remember this era being really cool in the Legends continuity, and I really hope the new canon does it. And I think the big thing that really disappoints me is that we don't see our main characters all that much, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. But before I start talking about the bigger parts, the first thing I want to shine a light on, and this applies to all three of the Aftermath trilogy books, so I'm not going to harp on it as much in the next two reviews, but I'm going to pretty much bring it up here. The writing style is very grating to read. So let me kind of put it to you like this. So unlike most Star Wars novels, they're told in like a past tense, and we've seen some differences, like there are some that, pretty much go chapter to chapter, describing the same story, but from a different point of view. Or, we have the Heir to the Jedi book that I just recently read that's told from a first-person perspective. This book is actually told from a present tense. So to kind of give an example, let's say that there's a part in the book where Wedge is entering hyperspace in his X-Wing. There would be a sentence you would expect there to be a sentence like, Wedge reached forward and pulled the lever, sending his ship straight into hyperspace. Instead, the sentence is, Wedge reaches forward and pulls the lever, sending his ship into hyperspace. And I know that doesn't sound like that big of a deal. I've written my fair share of things, like, kind of a spoiler alert. I tend to write my Power Rangers shows, that you might notice on the Toku Secrets podcast. I sometimes tend to mention that I write my own series. I do write it like that, but I do that more because I'm trying to explain it as if it's an actual show. This, I don't understand why Chuck Wendig is doing it. Like, was he trying to write a screenplay, like, for a movie or something like that? Like, I don't understand what the reason is for it. Like, I wouldn't mind the present tense writing style if there was a reason for it, but I don't know. I feel like Chuck Wendig just wanted to, look unique or something like that. I'm not sure if he had experience in writing other Star Wars novels before this, so maybe he just wanted to stand out among the others, but it does not hit. It is a complete miss. The writing style made it very difficult, and it almost kind of made reading this book feel kind of like a chore. And so the writing style is definitely something that was a huge grating thing about this book. But the big thing, another problem that I have is just the story of this. Even though the story itself is, pretty simple, it's kind of hard to follow at times. Like, there are aside from those four main characters that I mentioned, there are too many characters to keep track of. There's a lot of subplots that each of the characters are going through that just make it more complicated. And one of the things that some people like this in the book, and I don't know how I feel, sometimes in between chapters, they have these brief interludes, where, so the interludes, they take place, they're like little short stories that have no real bearing on the plot of the rest of the book. And it's supposed to kind of give us an idea of like what the rest of the galaxy is like now that the Empire has fallen, and, and the New Republic has taken over. And some of them are interesting. There's one where we see that some slaves have been freed by the New Republic, and they're wondering what they should do with their lives now. There's an interlude where two bounty hunters, one of them being Dengar. I'm pretty sure we all remember Dengar. He was one of the bounty hunters of The Empire Strikes Back, and he gets. We see him a little bit in one of Asajj Ventress's story arcs in the Clone Wars series. He gets into a fist fight with another bounty hunter, and he wonders what the future holds for bounty hunters, since the New Republic isn't as keen on hiring them as the Empire was. And we also get a very brief interlude that shows what Han and Chewie are up to. So that's pretty cool. And I get why the interludes are there, but it actually took me a little bit of a while to kind of figure out, like, oh, this is the point of the interludes. Because I didn't know if, like, they were trying to establish that, trying to, like, give some minor things that ultimately build up to, like, something bigger in the story, or if these are just, or the fact that these are just meant to, just establish what's going on in the galaxy in other ways. And you know what? I don't mind the idea of the interludes, but I don't know. Maybe it's just that this book is all over the place, and its writing style is just terrible, but I didn't really get that hint until a little bit later. Now, once I got that hint, the interludes sat with me a little bit better, and the interludes are actually going to get a little bit better in the next two books, but I'll talk about that later. I just kind of wish, I don't know, I think that if they wanted to do something more like this, they would have been better off just releasing a book with, like, a series of short stories, because I don't know, I have mixed feelings toward the interludes. But I get what they're trying to do, so I'm not going to harp on that too much. But the biggest problem I have with this book is the characters. Here's the thing. When I was going into this book, I didn't look at any reviews. I didn't really, I didn't want to be spoiled by anything. I was really looking forward to seeing what our, heroes from the original trilogy are up to. Like, I want to see what Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, and Lando are up to in this era. I want to get, like, a full book describing that. Now, thankfully, we are getting, like, we did just recently get another book, Shadow of the Sith, which I'm currently reading, and I'm going to review that when I get done with it. But instead, we get these entirely new characters that we do not know from the books. Luke and Lando, we only see them get mentioned, like, here and there. Leia only appears briefly. Han and Chewie, like I said, have an appearance in the interlude. Now, I wouldn't mind if Wedge had a bigger character, was a bigger character in the story, because I like Wedge. Wedge is one of my favorite side characters. In fact, there's a whole series of Legends novels that mainly focus on Wedge, and I'm cool with that. If you want to take, like, a minor character from the Star Wars movies, like a rebel pilot or a soldier who had, like, a bit role, and expand upon him and make him the main character of this book, totally fine with that, 100% cool with that. But instead, we're getting these new characters, and I'd give it a free pass if these characters were compelling, but the sad thing is, I don't find them compelling all that much. So I'm going to go over some of the characters briefly. Our main character is Nora Wexley. She is a former rebel pilot and a friend of Wedge, and her whole story is, the cliched, like, she left her husband and her son Timon. Her husband was arrested by the Empire, and she left her son Timon in the care of her sister, and, she went to go and fight against the Empire. So she has a very strained relationship with her son. Now, one thing I'll give Nora Wexley credit for is this. Technically, we see Nora Wexley in the movies, technically. So we're constantly told in the book that she piloted a Y-Wing fighter during the Battle of Endor and flew into the Death Star behind Wedge and Lando. And funnily enough, it's actually easy to spot her since, when Lando and Wedge begin their assault on the Death Star, there's only a handful of fighters that fly that are still with them when they fly into the Death Star, and there's only one Y-wing, so we can see that Y-wing, and that's one thing I'll admit that I like, because the Legends continuity back in the day always did these things where they would take these random and seemingly meaningless background ships that you see during space battles, and they give their pilots more fleshed out roles and backstories in expanded universe content. Like for example, you might recall at the end of A New Hope, when after Luke shoots the torpedo into the Death Star's exhaust port, you see two X-wings. You see the Millennium Falcon and a Y-wing fighter flee. We obviously know who the two X-wings are. The two X-wings, Luke is in one of them and Wedge is in the other. Who's in the Y-wing? Well, believe it or not, in expanded universe content, the Y-wing pilot is actually a man named Kean Farlander, who goes on to be a part of Luke's new Jedi Order. So I love that. I love how the Legends content, I love how they're following the Legends content where they're taking seemingly meaningless background ships and space battles and say, hey, let's retroactively take the pilot of that ship and make them a bigger character. I love that, and I love how the new canon is doing that. But unfortunately, even though I like how they established that Nora is someone who we can technically see in the movies, she's not really a strong character in my opinion. I don't really remember much about her. Typical estranged mother character. Just really dull, in my opinion, I'm not going to lie. Then we have, so like I said, it's cool that she's established as, someone who we technically see in the movies, but unfortunately that's the only good thing I can say about her. Now, fortunately, her son Timon is slightly more memorable. Now, funnily enough, Timon is a character that we do see in the sequel trilogy. Now, he's a lot younger here because, keep in mind, this takes place several decades before The Force Awakens. But we do see him as a resistant pilot in the sequel trilogy. I don't remember him doing much. He's a bearded pilot that's a tad overweight. I think Poe calls him Snap every once in a while, and we actually see him get shot down in The Rise of Skywalker. Well, that's him. Kind of a spoiler, I guess, of what happens to this guy, but to be fair, it doesn't happen until the sequel trilogy, so it's not like I'm spoiling anything in the books. So he's Timon is a tech genius. He makes a living selling junk. There's not much depth to him, but I think he was an okay character because, it's easy to relate to him. Most of this is him, rejecting his mother, not wanting to talk with her. And it's not hard to sympathize with him. I mean, she abandoned him and now just expects him to welcome her back into his life with open arms. I mean, is that really an ideal reunion? And one of the things that I really remember about him is, and this actually did make me laugh here and there, so there is some positivity in this book, is his relationship with Mr. Bones. Mr. Bones is a refurbished battle droid, and when I say battle droid, I do mean those, the I can't remember, the Generation 1, the battle droids that we first see in The Phantom Menace, the ones that say, Roger, Roger. He rebuilt Mr. Bones as his pet. He often has to be rebuilt with new arms, because keep in mind, this is ancient technology that we're talking about. There's at one point where he has to be given a makeshift arm that's the leg of an astro droid. So, imagine a battle droid with an arm that's one of R2-D2's legs. He's totally loyal to Timon. He goes out of his way to defend him. It's funny seeing a battle droid, a type of character that we know for being kind of dumb from the prequels and the Clone Wars, acting like a dog. He's basically Timon's dog. And that got a chuckle out of me, and that's a very heartwarming thing. So that is actually one of the more positive things about this book. So that's what made him memorable. Now, the best character in this book, in my opinion, is Joss Emery, the Zabrak bounty hunter. She's your typical bounty hunter, but she's a bounty hunter with a heart, I guess you could say. She gets involved in this conflict when she's hired to assassinate one of the members of the secret Imperial meeting, and then ends up getting involved in, the big, fight against the Empire. It's established that she just wants to do her job and then get out, but she's clearly developed a connection with the characters by the end. She kind of takes like an older sister role to Temin. It's simple, but that's what I like about her, because like with, I don't think the book is trying to turn her into a really complicated character. Like her story was the easiest to follow. And that's why I liked her, because you don't have to make her so needlessly complicated. But so I actually do like Joss Emery a little bit. And then we have Sinjir, who is another forgettable character. There's some cool things, like we get a big action scene in his debut where he single-handedly beats 2 stormtroopers in a fist fight while he's drunk, by the way. But aside from that, I mean, there's not much else I can talk about. He's a typical Imperial deserter. He apparently fought in the Battle of Endor and decided to leave the Empire during the battle against the Ewoks. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The only real big thing about him that I remember, and this is something that kind of garnered a little bit of controversy, Sinjir is actually a homosexual character. He begins to talk with Joss near the end of the book. He and Joss develop a bit of a connection, and Joss thinks, oh, like, I like you, thinking that, they're developing a romantic connection. And he reveals that he is not attracted to women. And believe it or not, this is not the first time that we've seen an LGBT representation in this book. Nora's sister, who was raising Temin, she actually lives with her wife. So Nora's sister is part of a lesbian couple. And I'm going to be honest, I don't mind Sinjir being homosexual because, like I said, I mean, and you've seen this in our Power Rangers Dino Fury review when we talk about Izzy. I don't mind LGBT representation. In fact, I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't know. I feel like maybe Chuck Wendig thought that Sinjir wasn't memorable enough, so he just decided to tack that on because, I don't know. I don't mind Sinjir being gay. I'm perfectly cool with it. I do, if I remember correctly, and I'm going to be going off my notes for the next 2 reviews, I think they touch upon it a little bit more. And I'm cool with how, they don't try to play it up because, I mean, honestly, you never would have known that he was gay until he reveals it, which, is literally, just trying to normalize it, which I fully support. I am a huge supporter of LGBT rights. So I do want to say that I can applaud Chuck Wendig for wanting to show LGBT related people in it. If only Sinjir was a memorable character, because like I said, I mean, I love Izzy from Power Rangers Dino Fury, but not just because she's a lesbian. She is just a great and upbeat character, and unfortunately, I can't say the same about Sinjir. But let's get back on the topic. Aside from that little moment, there's a lot of other characters. We get the Imperials who were at the meeting. None of them are really that memorable. The only one that I remember is Ray Sloan. She is Ray Sloan. You might recall her. I mentioned her briefly in my New Dawn review. She was like a supporting antagonistic character in that book, but she gets a much bigger role here. She's like orchestrating the meeting. She wants to, she's the one who's trying to lead the cause and bringing the Empire back. I appreciate how she gets brought back here. I appreciate Chuck Wendig trying to bring, connections to other books, so that was pretty cool. Normally, I would go into like Easter eggs and connections with other Star Wars related content, but aside from there just being like mentions of like planets here and there, I really can't remember much about it. But I will be able to give a little bit more of connections in my Life Debt review, which will be the next Star Wars novel that I take a look at. But I think the big thing that I really just think is disappointing about this is that this book was meant to bridge the gap between Return of a Jedi and The Force Awakens, and I'm not sure if Wendig intended to write the sequels to this book while he was writing it, although I would have to guess that maybe he didn't, but the book sold so well that, he felt obligated. But I'll be honest, if I read this book before I read The Force Awakens, I would probably left with more questions than answers regarding what direction the galaxy is headed. And, there's a lot of other issues, like the fact that this takes place just like a year after the Battle of Endor. And what really annoys me is that, like, they established that the Empire has already kind of crumbled into the Imperial remnant, and the New Republic has taken over. They did all of that in a year. That also really annoys me, because if I remember correctly, even though the Galactic Civil War between the Rebellion and the Empire, so it goes on for like 15 years after Return of the Jedi in the Legends continuity. Although it does eventually move to a point where the Rebellion takes over as the New Republic, and then the Imperial remnant becomes like the Rebellion. But if I remember correctly, I think it took like at least 5 years for the New Republic to take over. So I don't like how it only takes a year in this version. It just seems like way too hastily written. Unless we could get more details on how the New Republic eventually reforms, because I just think it's really too far-fetched on the idea that the Empire just magically crumbles after Palpatine's death. Definitely a lot of issues with that. But with all that being said, I can definitively say that Aftermath was a massive disappointment for me. There's some good moments, and like I said, Timon and Joss Emery, they're both okay characters, and I can applaud, trying to bring representation to the LGBT community. I'm all for that, but the good moments are undermined by a complicated story, far too many bland and forgettable characters, and the writing just makes it even harder to follow. I can say that the next book in the Aftermath trilogy is going to be a step up, but I'm going to be it's kind of, just to give you a hint on how disappointed I was in this book, it took me like a year after I read this book to eventually read its sequels, because I just wasn't looking forward to it. And I definitely can't recommend this to you guys. And you guys know that I'm fair. I like a lot of the new canon books. I really do. But this is probably the one new canon book where I just really don't like it, and I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna give this book an overall grade of a D minus. Although if I was gonna grade it based on how it bridges the gap between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, I would give it an F. But if I look at it on just its own, it gets a D minus. Just because there's a couple of moments in it that make me feel like it's not a total failure. But yeah, this novel is not really great, and I wouldn't recommend anybody read it. It's like and I just can't help but kind of just harken back to a comment that was left on my New Dawn review. A comment where I can't remember the name of the guy, but he said that like he really wished that this trilogy had been given to a more veteran Star Wars writer. Because like I said earlier, I can't remember, I don't think Chuck Wendig had written any Star Wars content before. So I really do think that if this was given to someone different, like Timothy Zahn or John Jackson Miller, or heck, I wouldn't mind if Claudia Gray did this, because Claudia Gray is one of the newer Star Wars writers who is actually really great. I really wish that she did this novel. So, yeah. Um, just kind of talking in circles now. The point of this podcast is Aftermath is a huge disappointment. Fortunately, the next book, I'm going to have a little bit, some slightly more nicer things to say, but yeah, I can't recommend that you check out Aftermath. And that you say that maybe that means that you can't check out the rest of the trilogy. Well, a little bit of a spoiler alert on my next podcast. The rest of the Aftermath trilogy, aside from, even though the next book is a step up, overall the Aftermath trilogy is not one that I can recommend for you. But I will be taking a look at those next two books next time. So with that said, that wraps up this cruise through canon for Aftermath. I thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast, whether you're listening to us on YouTube, iTunes, or Spotify. We all love you. If you are watching this on YouTube, leave some comments down below to let us know what kind of content you would like for us to cover on the Jedi Squadron, or you can email us at animesecrets.org, where our website is, just contact us. We always love to take your commentary, into account. I will read the comments at the beginning of any podcast on my book reviews. I want to give you guys what you want. If you guys ask for me to review a novel that I've already read, I will hop on it immediately. And if not, then I will make reading the next book that you want me to review a top priority. Once again, I thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I will see you guys next time when I cover the next book in the Aftermath trilogy, Aftermath Life Debt. But until that time, you guys stay safe. We love you, and may the Force be with you. If you enjoy us here on the Jedi Squadron, then please consider checking out our other content, including the Animated Classified podcast and the Toku Secrets podcast, which you can find on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or on our website, animesecrets.org. And if you have anything that you would like for us to review that hasn't already been covered here on the Squadron, feel free to leave any commentary, whether it be in the YouTube comments down below or by reaching out to us personally on our website. Also, please follow us on our social media pages, Anime Secrets, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to keep up with our content as we post it. If you're listening to us on Spotify or iTunes, we thank you so much and ask you to please leave us a rating out of 5 stars. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, like the video, and leave any comments down below that you may give in your commentary or stuff you want us to review, and so on and so forth, and we will give your commentary a shout out on the Squadron, as we absolutely love to give our fans the shout outs that they deserve. With all that said, we thank you so much for listening to us here on the Jedi Squadron podcast, and we will see you next time for our next adventure through the amazing world of Star Wars. But until that time, the Squadron is preparing to enter hyperspace once again, so you all stay safe, we love you, and may the Force be with you.